Alrighty. Well, yeah, we are just past the hour, so I think we can get started here. Welcome everybody to our AI panel discussion, the SORA Spring webinar. For anybody who's newer, my name is Michael Mativa. I'm the chair of the State of Oregon Research Academy, or SORA, and we are very happy to have you. We have a quick housekeeping note. This webinar, like all of our webinars, is being recorded. I'll, export the video, trim it, and that should go up on our website and our YouTube channel within a day or two. I usually get it up on the Friday after. So hopefully it should be going up tomorrow. When it does, like I said, we'll add it to our website and we will send out an email to our listserv as well with the link to that video on our YouTube channel. So this is going to be a panel discussion format. We'll have quick introductions from each of our panelists just to make sure that everybody's familiar with everybody's work and kind of topic area. And then feel free to and then I'll start asking some of the questions that we've gathered ahead of time. Feel free to drop any follow-up questions that you want to hear answered in the chat, and I'll try to incorporate those as we go as best I can. And then just a quick note on SORA programming in general. We are planning an in-person networking event this summer. SORA, prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, was a little bit more of an in-person networking, kind of blended in-person and remote. We've since transitioned to mostly remote, but if you're interested in doing something in Salem, just keep an eye out. Looking like we'll probably get something going this summer. So without further ado, I can stop sharing here. And I think we can have our panelists take it away. If you guys could raise your hands, the four of you, really quick, just to give an order for introductions, I suppose. So yeah, Joe, if you want to kick us off just with a quick introduction of yourself, your work, the organization that you work with, and kind of how your work intersects with AI.
Sure. My name is Joe Cheng. I work at a company called Posit. We are a fully remote company, so I work out of the Seattle suburbs. And for the last 15 years, I've worked at Posit, really focused on the intersection of data science and web applications. And for about the last year and a half, I've been working almost exclusively on figuring out how AI can be used responsibly and productively and reliably in the context of data analysis.
Okay, thank you.
Looks like Justus, you're next. Fellow Posit member in here. It's cool to see someone from that org here. So pleasure to meet you, Joe. My name is Justus Eaglesmith. I served on the AI advisory committee for the state of Oregon. I'm also an incoming AI engineer for Oregon Health Authority. And so a lot of focus on just artificial intelligence development, of course, and, leveraging statistics within machine learning models and things of that nature to understand what we're feeding into these models and the predictions that come out of it. So a lot of those data analysis techniques used within machine learning and AI for inference. So pleasure to be here.
Right, so I jump in. My name is Hector Dominguez. I go by he, him pronouns, and work for the city of Portland within the Smart City PDX program. I was also, and thank you for the invitation, Michael. Thank you for the connection, Justus, for this. I was also serving as part of the AI Advisory Council that the governor put together. My role within the city of Portland, I've been coordinating open data, privacy, surveillance technologies, and AI within the Smart Cities program for almost 8 years now at the city of Portland. We have been working, developing policies, and my background, my personal background, I'm an engineer by career, coming from doing, right now, I was thinking about that recently, and that I have about 30 years already of experience working with AI. So many of the attendees here, not probably older than that, which, wow, it makes me think a little bit. So I'm I'm very, yeah, I have many lives through that work, and from practitioner, and now helping to develop policies and procedures within the city local government.
Hello, I'm Gabrielle Guedon. I work for the Oregon Self Advocacy Coalition, and we are people with intellectual and developmental disabilities throughout the state, as well as supporting groups. And a lot of us receive DD services, if not all of us. And so we are the clients you guys serve.
Great, thank you very much. Yeah, thanks to all of our panelists for being here. We really appreciate you guys lending your time and your expertise. So we will kick off here. As all of the attendees, I think, should know, we have gathered questions through through a Slido app. People were able to vote on those. So we've got a few questions kind of grouped up here to go through. And I want to start in a little bit the practical applications of AI, just kind of ground the audience maybe in some of the ways that AI can be used or is being used in state government, outside state government, to possibly improve services, things of that nature. So we'll start off here. And I'd like to hear, Gabrielle, from you first. We had a question: how does AI make government more effective? Will AI better provide service to Oregonians? Will AI better involve Oregonians in state and local government? Yeah.
So I think what I've really experienced with a lot of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities is that AI is a fundamental thing for people right now, because without the accessibility of AI, they wouldn't be able to create things as a disabled person. I also find that with the support of AI directives, to be able to write notes and to be able to kind of create materials that are accessible to the individual, it's really crucial to be able to use that, because all of us don't know everything. But if we create a platform like a program through AI, with AI, we're able to pull from each other and support each other to develop and be able to have accessibility. With people with disabilities, they use AI a lot to be able to create those materials on their own. But what if someone doesn't have it and your systems are able to use it to really create those different documents, even when there's not anything available out there? It's really, I've personally used it, and it's really helped me like keep track and keep a list of dates and kind of patterns and support advocates, and also case notes. I do a little bit of case notes when I meet a new advocate to make sure I know their disability and their needs in one place. AI is so fundamental to me because my hands don't work correctly. And so it helps, and it'll bring in more caseworkers, more people into the field that might not be able to do the typing themselves. But with this, they're able to do everything else. They're phenomenal at their state jobs. It just creates an even platform for people so everybody can have access. Does that answer? I'm hoping.
Yeah, I think so. Does anybody else have thoughts, I guess, on ways AI can kind of integrate into the government, provide a little bit better service for people?
I just want to say thank you first to Gabrielle for that perspective. That is actually one I've never heard firsthand. I think most of the people that are participating in the discourse around AI and what is it good for and what are the dangers, like a lot of the people that I talk to about this, they are, PhDs that do statistical analysis for a living, and a lot of their perspective comes from a place of skepticism where, like, I can already do all these things. Like, why is AI going to do a better job than me? So, Gabrielle, thanks for pointing out that there are people for whom this technology is a real lifeline. And despite all the risks and costs and negative aspects of this technology, that for some people it's a huge game changer. So thank you for that.
It also can be more effective in some ways because have issues together. I think that also it creates a kind of even playing field, but also with that, there's more information than we all think of. within our positions, we are all supporting each other like we are right now on this event. And so I think that really pulling that, just because you can do it easier, like by hand in a sense, doesn't mean it's not as quick. So you can get back to that patient quicker, or that person you're supporting. By doing it this way, you are having more time management because the program you're developing around it, and it's getting to know you. It's getting to know what's needed. And so I think that's also something to consider as well. Your time's very valuable. It's basically the sum of it.
Yeah, I think for me is just also considering the complexities that our like modern life comes in, right? So everything is very interconnected. There is always pros and cons. There is going to be always uncertainty. And having emerging tools like AI within all the ecosystem of tools that artificial intelligence may offer uh, could be very, very handy. I think I really, again, I joined Joe's voice highlighting Gabrielle's point, because the real question is who's driving the decisions on how to use technology. What are the really the needs that we need to work together? Because sometimes what we see in government, myself working within government, is vendors pitching products that are looking for solutions, and it's not solutions that need to find, the technology, the right people around it, and all these different infrastructure to make the solution something real, right? And something that also is evolving with all the different issues that are evolving at the same time. And I think this is something that we need to keep always in mind as practitioners, or somebody who's in procurement within government. What are those metrics that we are using to identify those tools that are helping us to resolve the problems, and finding the best solutions for those? And at the same time, where are all these like overall infrastructure that helps that happen, right? From having the right money and budget on that, all these procurement processes around that, all the policies existing. So we're going to be talking about that.
Yeah, and I like that we started with the practical applications, because I think sometimes it can be difficult for individuals, maybe non-technical individuals who want to leverage the power of artificial intelligence, to see how they can step away from a conference or step away from a meeting and understand how they can apply AI. And so from my perspective, I see it kind of as a tiered approach. The easiest way is to, of course, assuming you have the BCA, like the business continuity agreements, to be able to use the software, but you can use open source models pretty safely, as long as you're not inputting sensitive information, PHI, into those models. And that can be a great assistant. There's been a lot of research done that shows that large language models, specific ones, can be great for market research. That can be a great help, having that as an assistant. So that's a first step, is using those large language models. That's a really good way to not have a lot of overhead, because the next step that kind of comes after that is the team using predictive analytics with data, from a machine learning standpoint, with data scientists predicting different, you could say, food shortages, healthcare sensitive events, things of that nature. Predictive analytics, from people don't a lot of times think about that, but from a machine learning within the umbrella of AI or vice versa, that's a really good way to start leveraging machine learning and things of that nature, and bringing on data scientists to do that. Of course, that takes the capital to be able to hire those people to do that. So that's a little bit more of a push, and it's more difficult for people to get the benefits from there. But then when you start bringing in, if you're a pretty big department or agency, and you can bring in AI engineers, then you can start working with agents internally and externally. So externally, that might be a chatbot that interacts with the client and refers them to various resources that are public information on the agency's website. That's a really great use of a chatbot and of agents in that nature. Or internally, share information sharing across departments. Having an agent basically would look like a chatbot, but it can pull information from existing documents and things of that nature to help with internal processes, Say you're working for a call center within some department. If you have direct access, if someone's telling you information, that can help minimize the errors that individuals are making when speaking or giving misinformation, unintentionally, of course, to clients that they're speaking with. And so that's kind of like a tiered approach of thinking of some practical applications. And of course, going back to starting with just getting comfortable prompting, what are good strategies for getting large language models to return valuable responses. And to answer that question really quickly, the way I like to think about it is if you have, it's almost like talking to a junior anything, whatever department you work in. If you have a junior analyst, whatever that is, you have to almost lay out every step for them. And so having the LLM return its thoughts on, if you're asking it to do market research for some sort of, health policy or something like that, and trying to estimate a response there, you have to walk through, okay, consider individuals that are from this demographic and how they're going to respond to it. And you have to put that in your prompt to lay that out. So I know that was a long-winded response. I apologize for that, but I'm really passionate about that practical aspect there. And so there's a lot of different ways you can go about it.
Yeah, I love what I'm hearing here from both Justus and Hector here, because I think it really reflects like this need to get pretty specific about what your needs are and try to tackle them with AI rather than the other way around. And I just want to point out that I think in the past when you've said, you need AI engineers, you need to be able to hire AI engineers to kind of adapt these technologies to your specific, problems and contexts and serve your constituents. In the past, that meant something like quite different than I think what it means today with LLMs, at least. That in order to be a machine learning engineer that is trying to train a custom neural net to recognize a set of images that you need to classify or something like that, like you were talking about quite a specialized skill set that you need a lot of education, you need a lot of math, you need a lot of like the difference between someone who knows these models well and doesn't is a huge difference. With today's LLMs, like they can be intimidating because they're so big, but like a little known fact about them is just how easy and accessible they are for any kind of programmer to take these models and leverage them. Inside of our company, it was very important to me personally to feel like we are not just coming up with an AI strategy, but actually having all the people that in any way program inside the company really get a visceral sense for how to use these large language models and what they might be capable of. And basically, we have had 115 people go through an AI hackathon process where within 4 hours, they're able to build really quite remarkable custom tools that are, like meeting these very specific needs. So I just want to put that out there that like AI engineer is not necessarily something that you have to go hire. You have to go find a PhD who can do these things. I'm sorry, LLM is large language model. So LLM is sort of what is underneath ChatGPT. And a lot of times today, when we're talking about AI, what people really mean is a large language model. And when we're talking about anything from coding assistance to artificial general intelligence, that's not what we're talking about today, mostly, hopefully, but all of that is sort of in the territory of LLMs. So all that to say is my mission is to help data scientists, people with data backgrounds who can write a little bit of code, realize that they are in a position to identify these opportunities where AI can make a big difference and to implement these technologies themselves, not waiting for someone with a PhD in machine learning to come along and help them.
We had actually somebody in the chat actually say what they're using today, which is showing and proving that it's already being implemented and used. It's having communication is key. And when you're deaf, or if you can't have your speaker on, having the AI transcript really helps, and captions really help people to stay focused, or people that have issues with focusing. It makes them actually have to focus on something versus the distractibility around us.
Great. Something that you have touched on, I think, as a group in a few different ways, and then I see questions in the chat as well, are, and have also been asked, was the number one question really in the Q&A before this. How do we ensure accuracy if AI is trained to answer questions about state policies and programs? So for example, in DOR, where I work, I know we had, wasn't really AI, I guess, but it was sort of a chat bot to answer questions, and that was a long process to try and make sure it was giving all the answers that we wanted it to. And similarly, somebody mentioned in a question, AI has been known to hallucinate. Are there measures we can take to make sure that those results are trustworthy? And similarly, given that so much AI training data is biased to reflect the current state of inequity, how is the state addressing, or how can the state maybe address and minimize these biases? So kind of a big topic area, but kind of accuracy and bias as a broad topic.
Yeah, I would like to maybe take that from the, like summarizing all that as a, can we trust AI, right? Because it's this issue about the accuracy of the response, this issue about what about these tools are actually blocking certain answers, right? On purpose, for instance, because of, you know, within the political environment right now, who is not really telling us that some of the answers, possible answers for the questions, are actually being blocked, or because of we are not collecting information from certain groups or certain topics. So that's never going to be part of the training data sets for an AI model, for instance. And on the other hand, we may have models that are like overtrained on a specific data sets, which is kind of the source of biases in general. And then some of the tools like LLMs are based on predictive models. So they are really guessing what's the most likely output from a chain of different outcomes that is internally generating. Right. So can we trust AI? And, you know, it's not a simple answer there. It's just what are the processes, procedures, infrastructure that we can put together as a government. Just I'm talking about as a government and from the government agencies' perspectives, right? Where we make sure that we are doing our due diligence to do our best to make sure that the outcome that an AI tool is giving us is the best outcome that we can actually get for the resources that we have, for the training that we have, for the policies that we have, right? That's has to be a work that needs to evolve with time, needs to get better. And also something very strategic is that we need to work with vendors. So vendors also improve the products for our needs as a customers.
What I've also noticed about AI is that it also learns by us. We can teach it, we can give feedback to it in our field, we can put information in and respond to it. And that's really something to consider as well, is that it's not always the people that are creating the product itself. It's us, the consumers, who are actually teaching it to reflect and respond effectively. I had a peer talk to me yesterday about how some terms were being used, not terms, explanation about shelter workshops, which were in some states still used, but some states aren't. And so their response to that was, no, it actually is not as beneficial as you think it is, AI. And so it's really the teachable moments are the consumers themselves, which really help it develop.
I know that from a standpoint of having it, kind of like I mentioned earlier, as a partner, a research assistant, someone that's helping you in your day-to-day operations, when you're going about assessing the performance, there's like two approaches. Of course, there's the technical side that I go to, but I don't think that's really what the question's asking on. It's more of like, if I'm using ChatGPT, how do I know if it's providing me accurate information? It's the same way that you would check if a junior analyst, junior researcher is providing you accurate information. You got to ask it, where are these sources coming from? You check those sources, and that's kind of how you validate it. The thing about large language models, when they're doing the research, scraping the internet to pull you information to inform its answer, is you have to do a lot more work than you think you have to do. Simply one prompt is not enough to get a valid answer. You have to ask it multiple questions, kind of like I mentioned earlier, about reflecting on its response back to you, providing the sources. The thing that you should think of with these large language models, the applications that you're using, is it's really just doing the tedious tasks for me of like writing things. But the process of me going through and doing research is going to land back on me ultimately at the end of the day. And I'm going to have to put in that extra work of double checking sources. And it just kind of speeds up that process. So when, as a user with these software applications, just to summarize, and you want to make sure it's accurate, you're going to have to double check pretty much everything.
I think like what you just said, Justus, is 100% accurate. And also, I think we need to be a little bit realistic about whether the users of these systems understand that, and to what degree they are doing those things that, you're right, they absolutely need to be doing. So for me, I think maybe Amanda in the chat said this, that it is so context dependent. So it's really hard to solve this problem for something as general as ChatGPT. But if we are deploying AI-backed services that are a little bit more narrowly focused, we can ask ourselves, for example, what is the downside risk of a hallucination? Like, what is the result of the machine giving a biased answer or a just completely factually incorrect answer? And for some things, it might be the difference between a sentiment analysis or a summary of a long document being slightly wrong. And depending on the context, that could be a very high stakes or a low stakes issue. For someone else, we work with a lot of financial services companies. If an insurance company is using one of these models to decide whether a claim is approved or denied, and a human is not in the loop, that is devastating. I mean, and I would say unequivocally, you should not be using AI for that, or at least you should not be using it in a way that doesn't have a human in the loop to correct for those biases. So I think being very, very careful about whether we want to deploy AI in these scenarios or not is going to involve questions like I just said, what are the stakes? What are the stakes of an incorrect answer or a very biased answer? Number two, like, who is the user and what is our level of confidence that they are going to be able to interpret this answer with the right level of skepticism, or the ability to verify these claims or these facts. And number three, like, if it's a relatively narrow set of questions that an AI is being asked to answer, have we done the work of exhaustively testing this thing and empirically coming up with an idea of how high we think the reliability is? And are we okay with that trade-off? So I think like all these things need to be considered when the stakes are sort of non-trivial. And sometimes the answer is no. Like sometimes the answer is no, we have to do this the old-fashioned way. Or even if this service is inaccessible to people, giving them the wrong answers confidently is worse than giving them no answer at all. Then like there have to be times where the answer is just like the technology is not good enough yet.
Yeah, I would like to add a little bit of that, because that's part of my job that I'm doing at the city of Portland is privacy impact assessments, right? So identifying the level of risk from the privacy perspective, what's the level of sensitive information, private information, confidential information that we are a specific project is managing, right? So definitely whoever wants or intends to use artificial intelligence has to have the right training, and that's where all the agencies need to work together, particularly in this case, and well, in our case in the city of Portland, and I assume the same, something similar at the state level. Human resources, they need to work on training staff to be able to use these tools properly, to be able to, now everybody needs to understand what information means, what cybersecurity means as well. And that's the new thing. And we all need to work together, right? As a government agency, sometimes we have really high stakes, high responsibility, and to do the work properly, because the impact can be devastating for some individuals and sometimes for whole groups.
So what really comes to mind is that the AI is going to respond differently depending on what state you're in as well, what part of the nation you're in, because some beliefs and some perspectives are higher in each location. And so the response from this platform, ChatGPT in itself, we're going to have there's certain situations. Oregon is actually the first place to close institutions. We're the ones we had Lane versus Brown to make sure that people could work in public. We had all these things. And so it's not going to reflect the same throughout the nation because of the fact that there are still institutions open. There are still this, there is still that. Until we bring the nation together, some things are not going to be accurate, no matter if it's in the disability community, doesn't matter where you are. Political in itself is different throughout each state. And so the platform is going to be responding to the majority of people response, but at the same time, we need to figure out how to train people within those states to re-educate our AI. As I have had conversations with AI, my ChatGPT, I upgraded to $20 a month just so I could really see what it was capable of, to see what it could do. I've created platforms, I've created all these different things. I've had it help within my job, but I didn't have the support to do that. It was scraping by basically. And so it's how do we then adjust AI to respond to the location that it's being used? And if we can't do that, we need to look at how we're having information collected by AI. Because really, shelter workshops, institutions, all those things, it's not going to be the same everywhere. And that is just I'm talking on the disability community, but it's going to reflect differently because it just is, because everyone has a different thing. We all have different bills too that go through. And that in itself is not straight across the map.
You've all touched on it, and there's been a good amount of question in the chat just about training the users, right? And so for this audience in particular, state government workers, I wanted to ask Hector and Justus, as members of the State AI Advisory Council, do you know of like unified training policies or anything like that that are coming down the pike that are at least being discussed as resources? I know people in my own agency have been frustrated, just kind of left to our own devices on that kind of thing. So
yeah, thanks, Hector. So the recommendation that came from the committee was simply that it was a recommendation. So we'll see what is put in place. However, that was a part of the recommendation was trainings for the state on AI tools, AI literacy, those types of things. So unfortunately, I don't have a direct answer on resources I can point to. And then coming into the state, I'm very new. We'll be onboarding, I believe, next week. So I'm not super familiar with the existing resources, but just from the AI Advisory Committee standpoint, I know that was in that document. So we'll see what develops out of that.
Yeah, I would say that, well, as part of that work with the AI Advisory Council, we had to take some basic cybersecurity training that the state offers. And those were great. I really enjoy them. The latest version includes AI, and I think they were really good design. Talking from the, I guess, accessibility perspective, sometimes training is not necessarily designed for specific needs. Like they really need to work on that, but in general, in terms of the topics and the baseline, I think they're not too bad. Sometimes training has to be also context dependent. It's very different when training gets received from somebody that lives in an urban area versus somebody who lives in a rural area. Somebody who's like culturally really attached to a specific context, culture, or setting, based on language, based on culture, based on social relationships, economic relationships. All that impacts the ways that in which we learn something, and the ways in which we apply something as well. So I think training, those who are involved in training design, sometimes they have a hard job to do, but it's also part of whoever is receiving the training to provide that input and feedback. So for those who are joining this conversation, you should actually ask for that to your HR agency, so they hear the needs. And the more voices they hear, the more likelihood that something is going to happen.
Yeah, that is a great point that I would echo. Talk to your HR person. Let them know that that training is important. Another kind of more heavily government worker focused question, but certainly open for anybody to give their thoughts here. More on the security side, or maybe the data privacy, I guess. People have asked, how do we understand where and when we, again, meaning state workers, I think broadly, can use AI? How do we understand how the AI is then using any information we allow it to access? So somebody gave the example, if it helps me improve my email language, has the AI then acquired all that content? Again, here, I think meaning large language models pretty specifically.
If you don't mind me jumping in on that first, I think there's a misconception that's common about LLMs that, if you think of an LLM as a person, then you obviously need to be really careful what you say to that person, because once you tell them something, they remember. Even if you tell them like, hey, forget I said that, they remember. And LLMs themselves, the underlying models, they are not like that. Every time you have a conversation with an LLM, you are starting from a completely blank slate. There are two kinds of machine learning models. There's a kind called online learning models, which means that as they're being used in production, they are actually using new data to update their priors as they go. And then there's a kind that's called batch learning, where learning is something that happens at one point in time, and then you deploy these systems, and these systems do not change over the duration of their lifetime until somebody goes through the trouble and the incredible expense to retrain this model. And LLMs fall into the latter kind of camp. So that's not to say that there are not data security and privacy concerns. There definitely are. But just be aware that the underlying technology is not inherently remembering what you're telling it. So what you should be concerned about is who is hosting this LLM. Is it Microsoft? Is it OpenAI? Is it Anthropic? The companies that are hosting it, they're seeing your data come into the model and then come back, the answers coming out of the model. And they would love to have your permission to take that conversation, to save it in their databases, so that the next time they sit down and do a retraining of their model, they can incorporate the learnings from the real world usage. And that does have a tremendous effect in making these models better. So I say this to say that it's not so much the underlying technology you need to be afraid of. It is, what is your contract with whoever's hosting the model, and how much do you believe that they are abiding by what the contract says. So for example, we use a lot of models through Amazon Web Services, and they are very, very clear in their contract term, like the verbiage makes it very clear. We retain none of your data. We train on none of your data. All of your data is just immediately dropped on the floor. So we feel very confident that Amazon is not lying to us about that. So that they're, modulo some regulations that need to keep up. We're not particularly worried about those cases. So I just want to put that out there, that there are real concerns, but it does not come from an inherent risk of the technology. It's the companies that are hosting the technology that you really need to know what their motivations and especially what agreements have you signed with them, whether you intended to or not.
Yeah, adding a little bit of that. Yes, as a government employee, at least in the city, or the recommendation in the city of Portland, the recommendation is to use licensed software that the city owns, partially also because of the existing laws, and particularly public record laws, right? So one of the questions that we have, we're trying also to really clarify in what we are doing is what becomes a public record in the new context of artificial intelligence, right? How that connects to what the vendor services, what they offer in general, and how that connects to all the ecosystem of different services interconnected among them, and it gets complicated really quickly, right? So in general, public records, as long as the public body retains an information, it's public records, right? So if the information gets retained in terms of the prompts that somebody's entering in a chatbot, for instance, if gets retained, the metadata and the log files, they get retrieved and then they get put together in a report, and they don't get erased, so that's public records. The outcome of the prompt, whether or not that's retained or deleted right away, that also may define what public records is. And it's something I think that, well, everybody needs to work on clarifying. Then there is another layer, right? So that has to do with HR, with the relationship between employer and employee. That has to do with, there are some things because of that relationship that they need to be retained, that sometimes when there are an investigation, they need to be accessible to everybody, right? So HR, there is an investigation, potential abuses and things that may happen as an employer-employee relationship. That's another layer that can happen. Of course, the cybersecurity issues, the general, the basic recommendation, do not share secrets to a chatbot in general, right? So you just use common sense, follow your training in general, do not share secrets. And if you really need to use or find out more about sensitive information, work with your IT, work with your vendor, try to set up really secure. There are vendors, particularly Microsoft and other vendors, bigger vendors, they offer like tiers of security. If you really want or need like a higher security tier, work with your IT and try to figure out how much that costs, what is required to set up something. Is my problem really need something like that? And then figure things out. Sometimes, for instance, for medical applications, for like public health, mental health in general, sometimes violence prevention information can be really sensitive, and it's worth to think twice and think deeper about those issues.
Alrighty. Well, we received a fair amount of questions about how AI use might be regulated in state government, as well as we had both this question pretty highly upvoted, and then we had a little bit in the chat I saw reflected as well. How are we weighing the detrimental environmental and ethical impacts of AI, e.g. lack of consent to have data scraped into training data sets? I know there's a lot of electricity and water use concerns as well. At the state level, how we're weighing those in decisions to use, not use. And similarly, or I guess kind of in the same arena, will there be an oversight committee to inspect AI usage for external facing usage of AI from the state government? Yeah, just kind of, again, maybe a little bit more focused on the advisory council here, but of course, open to anyone.
Something that isn't part of your question, but it just came to mind and I just want to bring it up. It's also how do we also teach the people we support the safety around it as well? Because I think that's really what is, if they're creating documents that they're sending us, what's the security behind that and what information are they giving that you guys might not be giving away, but they are accidentally doing, which then creates a security issue in itself. And so that's what, like, I use it for this and this. Could this be used against me? But you guys keep my information private. How do we really make that reflect and really see? Because it's not only what you guys do, it's also what the people you're protecting do on the outside as well. And then we don't want to blame you for something they put it into AI.
I think in terms of laws and regulations, there is already done, right? So in terms of fraud protections, identity theft, and there is a lot of laws that already exist that are applicable to regardless of what happens, right? The AI is one of those cases. However, I think there are emerging issues that AI, existing laws are not able to protect when we are talking about AI, and we are talking about like really social and big data kind of information level. And I'm personally concerned, maybe because I'm a father of a 10-year-old, on the impacts of AI on youth and children in general. When children interact with all these different agents, particularly when they are getting targeted advertising, for instance, or when there are like other cultural issues around that, to define young minds and the mindset, to define the universe and how they see the world in general. And over relying on these agents and automated tools rather than relying on community, relying on teachers, on librarians, for instance. So finding that balance. There is a bill, I'm not sure, I need to check in this session around defining the nurse or constraining the use of nurse only for humans and licensed humans, for instance, and not for automated tools like AI. The discussion is happening right now. And that's going to impact everybody. The discussions are going to keep evolving, and yes, there is a lot of literacy that legislators, their teams, and everybody needs to have, even vendors, just to get it right. And I feel like there are going to be some misses here and there that we need to be ready to have plan Bs and plan Cs. And if you let me, I know the silence, the awkward silence, but I wanted to tackle the ethical issue, because that's something really, really important, particularly the environmental impacts on that. I care about that. And yeah, every time that we do we use a prompt in the chatbot, that comes with an environmental impact, water needs, energy needs, and you know, in spaces where that's constrained, that's instead of going to some community, it goes to the data center, right? So what are those impacts? I think that comes also with a responsibility on the user and awareness on the user on how we need to really rely on those tools, right? So it's part of the training, it's part of the awareness that we all need to develop, and we need metrics for that. We need to start kind of thinking about what are the right metrics that we need to have for usage, what are the right metrics that we need to demand from vendors about that usage. It's not only economics and the financial metrics is not only the performance in general and time and all that, but there are other metrics around that. How do we account for that? And then once with the numbers, what do we do with that, right? So what's the action that we are going to be doing when we find out that we are taking too much water, or energy is getting more expensive because of all these? I don't know, speculating a little bit. And the ethical issues, yeah, we need to get more people trained on that, right? On board. We need to be friendly to them. And that's always, when we are budget and resources constrained, sometimes it's difficult, but that's where the hive mind might be a resource sometimes for getting it right.
So sorry. I just want to kind of follow up on what you're saying. There is a big consumption of water, electricity, and all those things are really big also fear for rural communities, because a lot of these plants are being put in there. I live in a place where they're questioning it, but we are not very rural, really, really rural, but we have 25,000 people and we are not bringing in that much money. There's a lot of pay, people are not getting as much. And so it's going to raise the cost of people and make a lot of people struggle as well financially, their families, and the impact it can take. So that's something I just wanted to back up. And Justice, I'm at my end of what I was going to say.
Thanks for sharing, Gabrielle. I think that touching on Hector's comment too is artificial intelligence is such a new industry that we're frankly just not super aware of some of the long-term impacts, kind of like with most things. But I will say the beauty is that there's a lot of opportunity for from a IT standpoint, non-technical people to get into the analysis of the outputs of things. And that helps refine and improve the way we do things with artificial intelligence. So similar to, the banking sector, there's a lot of limitations on machine learning models on how people receive loans and access to financial resources, right? And that's something that's been around for a long time because, of course, if we're using predictive analytics there could be a lot of impact if certain people are not receiving access, and historically that's been a problem in the banking sector. And so similar with artificial intelligence, you can monitor the outcomes and do analysis on the outcomes of artificial intelligence. Now, because it's language, it's a little more difficult, right? So it's not as simple, but you can do the statistical analysis on some of the outputs and kind of have understandings of, the types of things. I know Apple has done some research on like gender bias and outputs of LLMs. They did that back in, I want to say it was like 2019, 2020. But that's just an example of, you don't have to be an IT technical developer to do the research. And actually, I would encourage non-IT people to get involved in analyzing the outcomes of large language models and things of that nature, so that we have various inputs, that inclusive aspect of different minds looking at the impacts of things that are going on with AI that's being implemented.
I just want to say one short thing about the environmental impact, and not to minimize the potential harms of AI at all, or the ethical concerns, but in the particular case of the environmental impact, I think one thing we have going for us is that all the economic incentives are pointed in the correct direction, where the costs, the environmental impact costs are, a lot of it is just driven off of the sheer amount of energy usage, and that is essentially a cost that has to be passed through to the customer. So year over year, you're seeing that for a given level of capability, the cost and hopefully therefore the environmental impact is decreasing by about 10x the last couple of years. So a particular conversation that would have cost $1 2 years ago would cost a cent today. And that is an imperfect reflection of how much less electricity it uses as well. We are like at the very beginning of this, transformer architecture that underlies all of this. And there are a lot of breakthroughs every year that make these models much, much more efficient. I think we tend not to focus on that, because what these companies do is They just use all the extra capacity now to make these models smarter. So the top line figure keeps being the same, but I think at some point I would expect that you will see a dramatic decrease in the amount of energy being used for what we use for our day-to-day AI needs.
Great. I think we've got room or time at least for just one more question. Before we get to that, I wanted to thank all of you, our panelists, again. Really appreciate all of you being here. And two, I wanted to thank all of our attendees. We've had a really, really active chat. A lot of people discussing a lot of different facets of this topic. And so kind of to wrap up, I wanted to ask a couple of different questions that we got about resources. Any resources that the four of you or anybody in the chat has found to be helpful or effective for educating colleagues or really anyone else, both on how to use AI, acceptable uses. We too had a question, how to get people comfortable with AI to enhance their performance at work. Some people, as we've seen in the chat, being kind of very gung-ho, other people being very resistant. Yeah, any resources that you guys have found helpful?
It almost sounds too obvious, but both OpenAI and Anthropic's the company behind Claude, both of them have a prompt engineering guide, which is basically like how to ask questions of LLMs effectively. Both of those are very good.
I think for me, and that's what I do also for myself, I'm a technologist by career, right? But I want to balance also my techno-optimism with more critical perspectives and more critical views. And then my recommendation would be just to try for you to find that balance. If you are a techno-optimism, like in the techno-optimism side, so you really want to use the technology, you go to the vendors, you go to all these different companies, and they're going to sell you the product, right? So you're going to find all this information to be an adopter and sometimes an evangelist of all these products. But you also look into the critics of all of them. So there is like a huge networks that are actually looking into more critical, from a more critical perspective on the impacts of the technology, the whole life cycle of the technology, from the privacy perspective, from the security perspective, from the social and anthropological aspects of the technology, sometimes from the historical aspects, and of course from the equity perspective. So it's quite complex. There is not a single source of people, but there are a few authors here and there that you can easy to find right now. Some organizations also that they do great work. From my personal experience, Data and Society is one of those organizations. There are some other organizations and foundations that also have really good guidance in general for local government, for states, and yeah, the list can be really, really long.
Kind of showed earlier, but this book, AI Engineering by Chip Hulian, has a really good kind of overview of high level things, and it gets more technical, and I just recommend skimming through books as far as you're comfortable going. But also Stephen Wolfram has a What is ChatGPT Doing and Why Does It Work? And that was one of the first books that I dove into when I wanted to get into the kind of AI engineering space. And it very simply, well, it's Stephen Wolfram, so as simply as he puts it, he's a pretty smart guy. But he lays it out pretty easy for someone who's not familiar with machine learning data, things like that, to work your way through and understand. Okay, this is how it gets to an output. This is how the transformer architectures use big data and probabilistic outputs to get to what I'm seeing on my screen. So those are my two recommendations.
So for the panel, I know that this is an odd question, and I know I'm kind of taking over, Michael. Is there any accessible materials for people that are newer in from the state? I think we got to make it then.
There are organizations who definitely are working on accessibility and assistive technology using AI. Yeah, and they are great. They are doing really, really good work. But from the organization to the implementation in specific groups or in government, yeah, there are a lot of steps that need to happen.
Very much so. A lot that still needs to be done. Well, we are at the top of the hour, so I think we can call it here. I want to respect your guys' time, let you go on time. But thank you once again. I really appreciate it. Thanks again to our audience. The video should be up hopefully tomorrow. And yeah, pass it on to anybody who couldn't make it or anybody you think might be interested. Appreciate you guys all coming.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.